This is going to be a combined review from a Christian perspective of the 2020 version of Emma and the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice. Now, because of Corona, I don't even know if Emma ever made it into theater. But I knew instantly when I saw the preview that I wanted to see it. Now, we all had this idea that back in the past, Christianity is such a drag, and we had all these rules, and you couldn't breathe, you couldn't become a human being. But the reality is, when I look at what we have today, I don't see human beings, I see animals. I see animals. I'm depressed by the level of depravity that I see nowadays. And I don't say this out of hate. It's just, there's a phrase called malakoi from the Greek in the Bible. It means soft. Now, we often translate it as effeminate, which means, of course, homosexual. And a lot of people, frankly, lie about the Bible. The whole case against us from the Bible is a lie. Translate that flat out as homosexual. Malakoi, and I talked to someone who's in Greece, malakoi means soft. It means morally weak. And a lot of these novels, and you see here from the 19th century, come from a Christian society. And they illustrate Christian virtues or lack of Christian virtues. And in the process, they create these illuminating, captivating characters that capture you and draw you in, even when they're a catastrophe, like Madame Bovary, who is malakoi. You've all made George Floyd up in Minneapolis into a saint, but George Floyd was malakoi, and unless he repented, he went to hell. Now, we don't know that he went to hell. He could have repented. And if he's struggling against being malakoi, then if you struggle against being soft, you're no longer soft, right? 'Cause soft people don't struggle. So I don't know exactly what happened. But Madame Bovary is captivating because she's such a catastrophe. Now, what Christianity did is it created a superstructure, a cultural superstructure, not restrictive, but rather provides a social context in which all the characters move. There are expectations. This superstructure is the emergent product of a thicket of ideology and theology that is ultimately founded on the teachings of Jesus Christ. And it's fantastic. You know, gardeners don't let their trees and bushes just grow wild. They restrict them and therefore allow them to flourish. Children need lots of love and lots of rules. When they have restrictions and love, not just for the sake of restrictions, children flourish. They don't like them, but they desperately desire them. I'm often reminded when I look at these movies, and I really need to read these books, of the writings of C.S. Lewis. Now, all this contrasts with the 1995's Clueless, the modern version of Emma set in Los Angeles. I thought at the time it was fantastic. Now I see it's very lacking. Although there was a line in there that was one of the most profoundly moral lines that I've ever seen. She's talking to her father, and the son of his ex-wife's always hanging around there, her stepbrother. Why is he always here? And her father said, "You divorce wives, not children." And her father, I don't know who this actor was, but he was a dark Italian mobster-looking person. I think he actually plays mobsters. But there was such kindness. It was such kindness. Now, there's a lot that both movies have in common, and they show that. Now, this is Jane Austen. Yeah, by the way, the book's by Jane Austen. Jane Austen had kind of a cloistered world. She wasn't out in the world, and so there's a lot of things these movies have in common, and probably a lot of her books. They have far-seeing fathers who carefully track the people for whom they are responsible. See, this thing with the patriarchy, the father is responsible. He has to make sure you make it and grow up to be a robust citizen. They don't actually say much until the very end. There's a dance ball with dancing scenes that are all critical turning points in the plot. They're families that were formerly important but have fallen on hard times, just like her family. Honorable men are contrasted with scoundrels, dishonorable men, who are compelled by the former to do their duty to the women in their lives because they're on the verge of ruining their lives. There's the arrival of perfectly timed letters. We see that in Downton Abbey notes, perfectly timed notes. And when I watched Downton Abbey, it was also like reading C.S. Lewis, Christianity in Action. It's a great effect, by the way. There are bookish women. And finally, beautifully matched couples who have no idea they've been in love all this time. Works for me. Now, I'd never heard of Anya Taylor-Joy. She is fantastic as Emma, and her best dialogue is what plays across her face. This is why I knew instantly watch the preview where she does this thing with the carriage. Beep. She opens up the window for a carriage to talk to somebody that she doesn't really want to talk to. Johnny Flynn is perfect as her foil, as the man she's been in love with all this time and she didn't know, George Knightley. Now, in Clueless, he would be Paul Rudd's character. Miranda Hart played the brainless chatterbox Miss Bates, and she really gets on your freaking nerves. Until you discover she has to keep talking so she doesn't think about the deep terror that she will die alone and in poverty because she comes from a formerly important family. She has no husband, no children, no status. And she's terrified, and she's latched on to Emma desperately. Hope I didn't give away too much. Miranda Hart plays her. And when Emma's opening the window to her carriage, it's so she has to talk, because she has to talk to Miranda. Keira Knightley is decent as Elizabeth Barrett, the main character in Pride and Prejudice. She seems to be well aware that she's playing an important character, though I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair. She was good. Now Matthew McFadyen, he nails it as the grossly misunderstood Mr. Darcy. He suffers from a profound inability to properly express himself in mixed company. Now there's a scene in there that touches me that I think about it, where Elizabeth is in his house, because apparently these grand manors, when the Lord wasn't home, you could visit, like a museum. And she doesn't know he's there. And she peeks into a room because his sister's playing a piano, and it's glorious, because she plays the piano too, although not very well. Also, in both movies, there's piano playing, also very important. And so she peeks into the room, and he's there. He walks up, that's his sister, and he picks her up, and they hug, and there's such joy in his eyes. And you see that this is a very kind man. He's very rough, but he's actually very kind. Now, the very Christian morals of Emma, here's what they are. You take responsibility for the damage you've done to other people. That means taking active steps in repairing that damage. Emma had shoved Miss Bates over the cliff with a thoughtless joke at her expense in mixed company. Oh, you could say one fantastically interesting thing, two moderately interesting things, or three boring things. And it's kind of a game that they're playing. And Emma says, "Oh, but my dear, you can. Why stop at three with you?" And it's like, and it's just really just horrifying. Pride and Prejudice. Pray to your Father and give your alms in secret. Be the good son who does as his father wills, even though at first you were like blowing him off, as opposed to the bad son who says, "Oh yeah, you'll do it," and then you don't do anything. Mr. Darcy does good deeds, and he doesn't want anybody else to know about it, including Elizabeth, the main character. She thought he was puffed up with pride and riddled with prejudice. And all along, it turns out that's exactly what she was guilty of about Mr. Darcy. Double irony, since she's the poor one and he's the rich one. And that is true morally as well. As it turns out, she is the poor one. As Jesus says, some who are first will be last, some who are last will be first. Some, but not all. Now, as far as making things good, she had to go up to Miss Bates and she had to make good on that. She also meddled in the match between her good friend Harriet Smith, her best friend, because she realizes at the end, at first, all the way through, she's her patron. And now she's realizing, this is my best friend. I've hurt my best friend. And she meddled in the match between her best friend, Harriet Smith, and the yeoman farmer, Robert Martin, whom she thoughtlessly believed was surely not good enough for Harriet. And it devastated because she, with her face, not with anything she said, with her face. What's her name again? Anya Taylor-Joy? You must watch this movie. With her face, she has her turn down Robert's offer, and it devastated him. And she had a good relations with his sisters. They loved him. And she was like an orphan. It's like, so not only was she gotten a husband, but she would have gotten sisters. It was the best thing for her. The characters of all these movies are beloved and grand, including Madame Bovary. You can't stop thinking about them, as opposed to modern characters who promise much but deliver very little morally. And as it turns out, without morals, you're just wild, not human. The tree needs to be pruned, as do you. God bless.